Hello, everyone. Welcome to our 16th Book Buzz. This is our Sweet 16. So we decided we had to have a party today, but it's a different kind of party. It's an audiobook party. So we are so excited. I'm Jen Rubens. In case you haven't joined us before, thank you for joining us. We know that, times are tough, and we're glad that you've made the decision to spend your morning with us. Hopefully you have your coffee. We do, and we definitely brought the audiobooks today and some special guests. We will not be disappointing you. No pressure, guys. But let's go ahead and introduce ourselves. Like I said, I'm Jennifer Rubens from the Penguin Random House Library Marketing Team.
Hi, guys. I'm Sydney Check. I'm also from the Penguin Random House Library Marketing Team, and I'm reporting from Connecticut today.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. I'm reporting from Brooklyn. That sounds so official, reporting. And then let's go ahead and introduce our very special guest.
Hi, I'm Dan Zitt. I'm the SVP of Content Production for Penguin Random House Audio, and I am checking in from North Haledon, New Jersey.
And I am Karen Jakonski. I'm the Director of Audio Production at Penguin Random House Audio, speaking to you from South Huntington, Long Island.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled you could join us today. I've had the pleasure of working with Dan and Karen for a long time, and I'm very excited for all of you to meet them if you haven't already. But they have been guests at ALA before. They're very familiar with all the library love that we share in our departments. So we have a really fun kind of behind-the-scenes look at audio for you today. But before we dive into all of that as promised, we also want to let you know about some other cool stuff that's happening this week.
Yes. So we have virtual events that are happening this week, and there's a ton of great resources that PRH collectively puts together. So here's just a few that we're just highlighting this week. But we have the Random House Summer Reads panel with some fabulous authors, and there's also going to be a book club with the One World imprint featuring How to Be an Anti-Racist with Eva Max Kendi. There's also going to be a bookstore book club with Ruth Bihar and a book club with Sue Monk Kitt. So lots of book clubs happening this week, lots of virtual book clubs. But if you're interested in learning more, feel free to go to prh.com/booksconnectuslive and find more amazing events.
So now we're going to have our own book club of sorts, as you guys know, but it's going to be an audiobook club. So to kick it off, let's learn a little bit more about our special guests, Michelle Obama and Helen Mirren. No, I'm just kidding. Dan Zitt and Karen Jakonski. So do you want to just tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do?
Sure. So I oversee audiobook production for Penguin Random House Audio US. We have a team of about 22 people. We have 15 recording studios on 2 coasts. So I am responsible, not solely, for the production of over 1,700 audiobooks a year.
Wow, that's a pretty big number.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I work very closely with Dan as the Director of Audio Production. I supervise a team of producers and kind of help them with things that come up, problem solving, how to approach certain productions, and just to kind of keep the producer team moving along with their programs. And I also produce, and so does Dan, a full title count of programs as well.
Yeah, we're not just management folk. Like Karen and I have been producing audiobooks and have known each other for over 20 years. So
yeah, Dan actually taught me how to produce audiobooks back in I think I started in 2020. In 2000. This is my 20th year.
I was going to say, you're very new here.
Yeah. I wish.
A prodigy.
Yeah.
And Karen has taught me many, many things other than audiobooks, that's for sure.
And I've learned so much from you about audio over the years, and we've had a lot of fun. And Dan, I always laugh when I see this picture, because wasn't it at a library event that this little girl's jaw dropped to the floor when she saw this photo? I think it was at a library.
Yeah, we were doing a library event. I forget where we were, but this picture came up on a slideshow, and all you heard was a little girl that was probably 8 or 9 in the first row go, "Get out!"
So, I mean, it's very cool. What I love, I mean, we all love books, we all love authors, and I think it'll be really fun to hear about the special relationships that you've built, both with authors and with actors, and all the many, assets of production, as we'll learn a little bit more about today. So as a reminder to everybody, we have a hashtag. It's PRH Morning Buzz. So please use it. We want to hear all about what you're excited about too. And then we also have our chat and Q&A boxes on the side. And the lovely Kelly Coyle-Crivelli is on hand to answer your questions, your burning questions. So let's move ahead to something that I think might be on a lot of our minds. I mean, we're already talking to book lovers and audiobook lovers. We know that it's not our typical time right now, hence the creation of this show even. So how is audio being recorded right now? What's different? What's the same? And how are we managing this time?
Wow. So we left our offices, Karen and I and our production team and our office in general on March 11th. With a lot of uncertainty, trying to figure out, okay, so we can't record in our buildings anymore in New York and Los Angeles. What do we do? Luckily, the audiobook industry has a ton of narrators who work from home in recording studios, but we first moved all of our productions out of our studios into more isolated areas, commercial studios, and then when the pandemic got worse, we completely changed the model of production that we had been using for the last 20 years and dove right in with home narrators. And one thing about home narrators that's really interesting is that, we knew nothing about that world. We knew that people recorded books at home, but we didn't realize how different it was going to be in recording at home. And the one thing we decided to do is kind of create our own process and adapt what we do in recording studios and high-end recording studios. We brought directors into narrators' home studios virtually, which I think, Karen, you could probably agree, made some of them a little uncomfortable because, no longer were they recording in their pajamas. They were like, oh, I have to actually I have to do my hair today.
That's how we feel about this buzz.
Yeah, because I'm going to be Zooming with a director for the next 8 hours. But we adapted pretty quickly, and we were very lucky because we built a casting platform a couple of years ago called Ahab Talent. And the minute that COVID hit, I said, we're going to need a lot more actors to record books from home. And Julie Wilson and I reached out to about 300 agencies around the world and just said, do you have actors who have home studios? Sign them up for Ahab. We want to know every actor out there that has a home studio. And as Karen can attest to, the producers adapted very quickly. And all of a sudden, we didn't miss a beat. We didn't miss an on-sale date. We didn't, outside of just kind of changing operationally how we work, we just kept forging ahead.
And you guys can see some examples on the screen there too.
Yeah, I mean, looking back on the past few months, it's really amazing what we've been able to accomplish as a team and also with all of the narrators who work from home. I mean, not only did we start working with narrators who had long-established home setups, we also wanted to continue working with actors who didn't, who would be right for our audiobooks. So when they initiated, kind of creating their own home recording situations, our post-production team provided a tremendous amount of support to them to get them up and running so we can continue working with them during these circumstances.
And just one thing to mention, related to studios, when you're working in your own studios, and we have 15 of those, it's a lot easier to keep the quality pretty consistent. Now we're working with hundreds of actors who are, have to deal with landscaping sounds and, their children running in. So it's basically like managing hundreds of studios instead of, 15 or 16.
In your honor, I tried to set up a little example. So, I mean, people need insulation, right? They need they need a pop screen filter. Is this how you use this? No, I don't think so. But I think it's really amazing what, so many narrators already worked at home, but I think what PRH was often known for too is there always was the presence of a director, and we often, didn't have them record from home in the past because we had all these studios that they could use all the time. So get this out of my way. But and then I loved hearing, and it just sounds so interesting. Tell everyone about the studio in a suitcase and how we've helped, because authors are not prepared oftentimes. Recording is not a normal part of their day-to-day life at any point, and so it's always a unique experience. How have we handled helping authors out when they need to jump into the studio?
Oh, I think that was the biggest challenge we face. Adapting to a home studio model for actors is one thing because they're performers and a lot of them have been doing it for a while, so they understand all the technical aspects of what we do. Studio in a Suitcase, or Studio on the Go, as we were calling it later, it really came about because we wanted to record Max Brooks' book Devolution and really get it done in time for pub. And our engineering team, led by Oki Kolwitz, created essentially a suitcase with everything Max would need. Now, what everyone should know about recording at home is that 10% of recording at home is the gear. It's the microphone and the computer and everything else. And 90% of it is where you're recording it. And this industry, when it started, there were a lot of people recording books in closets, which is really actually a good place to record a book back in the day when recording studios weren't doing this work. But now, just trying to coach an author into a space that actually makes sense for recording long-form audio is really challenging. If you want to record a 30-second commercial spot, it's pretty easy to find a quiet space for 30 minutes. Try finding space for 10 to 12 hours. And just in the case of Max Brooks, as you can see, they coached Max into a space under his stairwell in what he called a hobbit hole, and helped him to set up what we thought was a really good sounding room. And if you listen to the audio, Max sounds really great. So it was really challenging.
So is this the new norm now? Everyone's going to have to wear that light on their heads to record audiobooks beneath Max's.
I've not seen that light till now, but I think we should certainly buy some of these.
It looks like he's hunting for treasure or something. I'm sure there's a good book metaphor there. That could be his next, novel.
There were a lot of really important author reads that we continue to record, and you'll hear more about those later. But it's really important for us to kind of keep our authors in the studio when it really makes sense to have them in the studio.
And I should just add, that's amazing. I love that photo of Max Brooks. But also, if anyone has not heard the Devolution audiobook yet, there are also an array of so many beloved actors on that audio as well. It's a real collaborative, very cool production, which anyone who's heard World War Z will not be surprised by that. But just an extra plug there as well, because you had to coordinate actors all over the country, if not further, to get that.
All the recording has taken on a whole new world just because we used to be able to get actors into our studios, and now you're recording one actor in Illinois and one actor in Alaska and one actor in California. So matching those sounds to make something really sound good and kind of consistent is challenging too.
And then Karen, you got this photo of a pillow fort from Brooklyn, right?
Yeah, this was from Ayanna Johnson. She's one of the editors on the upcoming book, All We Can Save. It's a collection of essays by female climate activists. And she has a podcast set up at home, which we listened to, and we made some recommendations for, surrounding the area with blankets and pillows to get a better sound. And that's what she ended up with, and it actually sounds really, really good. We're recording with a total of 12 actors, kind of in all kinds of environments. So like Dan said, there's just huge challenges in post-production to just do our very best to make everything sound consistent throughout. But we didn't want to pass up an opportunity to work with some of the actors reading these essays who are also climate activists in their own rights. So we have Jane Fonda on it, and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Ilana Glazer. It's just America Ferrera. So it's just a great cast of women who just came out for the cause, and we're making it work with them. It's been a fun process.
And one other thing to say about home studios is that this is not ideal, and we don't want to do this in the future post-COVID. We don't have to. The best anecdote I have from home studio life is that I had an author who was intent on working at his place up in the Bronx, and we sent him a suitcase and he set it up, and he literally walked out of the studio because he was so frustrated with the noise that was coming in to the studio. And it's takes a level of if you're not sitting there with your author, it's really hard to coach them via Zoom, and really kind of there's an emotional aspect to this recording. And if you have all these technical things going on, it really does challenge people's patience. But books still sound good after they get through our post-production and editing team.
Of course they do, of course. And also, speaking of some creative things I've seen, these are some other favorite photos that have come through over the past few months. Masha Gessen, an award-winning author, recorded in a car, which I think is pretty clever and actually could have really amazing sound quality, right? I mean, clearly. I mean, her audiobook sounds great.
That's just a fabulous photo. I hadn't seen it before you showed it to me. I just think that's great.
And then I love to. Oh, go ahead.
No, it was a really smart idea, although it's really hot in that car, I'm sure. If you go inside your car, inside your garage, if you live in the suburbs, it can be pretty quiet. So
I know. I have to be very careful, obviously.
I've escaped into my car for meetings during COVID when my kid and my dogs are running wild. So
I'm sure. Well, maybe you should start recording audiobooks in your spare time. And then I love also it's so important, and I think this can be said for any time, that we have to serve, especially with different authors coming into our studios, we have to serve such a wide range of needs at any time, but especially during this time. I also really love this photo from Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong, who, writes about, obviously you can see on the slide there, but first-person stories dealing with disability, and then to have to be able to serve her in the best way possible to record her audiobook. I love that we're really rising to the occasion and making that happen. And you can see on the slide there her producer and director, Linda, right? And then Alice, and then is that her editor there?
I actually don't know, but I know it's Alice.
I think it's just the same
top left.
Yes. But that's a really amazing photo too, showing how everyone's coming together and creating their own environments that really serve their needs to make this work.
I mean, I remember talking to Linda a lot about how to make this particular recording work out, and it was very important that we, create a situation where Alice could narrate her introduction because it was powerful. So a lot of planning and work went into it, and I think the end result is really great that she was able to participate.
Yeah. And then here's some other great photos. Oh, pardon my
Yeah. So clearly we have some star-studded authors reading their own audiobooks here. So we were just wondering if you had any unique anecdotes about these authors reading their books and why you're excited for these particular productions.
Well, I think one of the biggest parts of quarantine for me has been the fact that all I'm doing is cooking, and I love to cook at home. Karen's married to a chef. I'm sure you have the same experience, but I've been a huge fan of David Chang's for a long time. And this book really reminded me a lot of having worked with Tony Bourdain years ago on Kitchen Confidential. It's not just about food, although it's a huge part of the book, but it has a lot to do with David Chang's bipolar disorder and depression, but also just trying to find his way in the culinary world as a chef who really appreciated street food and trying to bring it to the masses. It's a really great recording. And considering where Dave recorded it, which was, something we went back and forth on in that big room with no soft surfaces,
well, he has a little insulation there.
Yeah, it really does sound good. And we recorded it over, 7 days, 2 or 3 hours at a clip. But Dave sounds great, and the audiobook is going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I can't wait to share that with my husband. He's been cooking a lot of Korean food in quarantine because he's been listening to David Chang's podcast, and I know he's going to love this book and audiobook. I've worked with Brene Brown for several years, and we have just a really nice thing going. And the 10th anniversary of The Gift of Imperfection, we actually recorded it a couple of weeks ago. So I was Zooming into the session to direct her and work with her while she recorded in Houston. And unfortunately, we had just a terrible storm on the East Coast that knocked out power and internet in my neighborhood. So I packed up my kids and family and drove to my parents about an hour and a half away because they still had power and internet. And then the next day, when 10 minutes before I was supposed to log on with Brene and work with her for a few hours, my parents lost internet.
Oh, no.
So I was just, pulling my hair out and on the phone with Brene, and she just said, "Karen, you're in a crisis within a crisis. Don't worry about it. We'll take it." So I had the engineer work with her for a few hours, and everything turned out great. And she's such a pro with recording her audiobooks and presenting in general. So I'm really happy with how this came out.
I wanted her to say, "This is a gift of imperfection, Karen." Run with it. You can do a TikTok on it later.
I was so happy that she kind of got what was going on because I just tried so hard to make it happen. And then I did wrap up with her. I had to borrow my friend's home when we came back here and get her internet connection. So it all worked out. But yeah, we've just all been kind of scrambling to make these productions work. You know, it's not bad enough that we're, you know, in quarantine, but then no power, no internet on top of that.
2020.
The end result, no one would ever know. And I think that's the magic of this. And Cindy, you're a big fan. You've listened to a lot of Brené's audiobooks, right?
Yeah, I do. I love her. I've listened to her Netflix special, listened to several of her audiobooks, and just the fact, like hearing that story just made me smile instantly. I feel like that's such a classic. It's good to know that that's such like a classic thing that she like actually would say to you in person too. Makes my heart happy.
And then there are some other amazing audios on this slide. Do you want to share a little bit more about those?
Yeah, I'm going to be working with Megan Rapinoe coming up in the next couple of weeks. We added this slide because I just think she's a fabulous human being, you know, Olympic medalist, two-time World Cup champion, activist, especially for social issues and LGBTQ rights. Currently, she's down in Florida in the WNBA bubble, so she's going to be using their studio facilities. And I think her message is really great, and this is one I'm really looking forward to. Walk Toward the Rising Sun is a recent author read that we just recorded with Ger Douani. He's a refugee from Sudan. He was a child soldier. His story is absolutely amazing, what he went through, you know, being a refugee in Ethiopia and then coming to the United States and becoming an actor and then continuing to be an activist for people in Sudan. His read is incredible. His voice is so beautiful. We talked a lot about preserving Ger and how he sounds. You know, with listening library titles, we usually strive for word perfect, you know, word accuracy. And with this one, because English isn't his first language, we kind of loosened the reins a little bit. And because that pressure was off him, he just really shines in his audiobook. So this is another one that I'm very excited about as well.
And I think that's so important. I mean, whether you're a child or an adult, but that, you know, experience of really getting to hear an author in their own words when it's something that they can do. I know it's not always, you know, you guys always make the right choice for what the audio is, but I think especially knowing this is a listening library title and that gift to a kid who might never be able to walk in someone's shoes like this, to be able to hear him in his own words with that freedom behind the mic is such a unique and important experience.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for that one. And then this is an amazing example. I mean, obviously everyone I think on this, you know, I'll call it our book club, our book buzz is familiar with George Saunders, I hope, and familiar with Lincoln in the Bardo. But I couldn't leave him out, and he's seen there with his producer and director, Kelly Gilday. But can you talk a little bit about this kind of relationship and how this has shaped or changed some of the author productions that we've done lately?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, you know, I've always said about our production model is that we don't have a production model, and that's why we're successful. Like, we're willing to stretch the boundaries of what is possible in audio. And when Lincoln in the Bardo popped up and Kelly Gilday called me and said, you know, George and I are talking and we're thinking about having unique voices for, you know, every character in the book, I said, well, all right, well, how many voices are we talking about? And she's like, it's 166. And I was like,
no big deal.
We're doing that. We're definitely doing that. We have to do it. It's going to be so cool. Let's do it. And it's one of the best audios you'll ever hear, just from like the standpoint of performance, but also just the sheer volume of actors and people that are on that audio. And I think half of them are on this call. I'm on that audio. I know Jen is probably on that audio.
I'm not.
But there's a ton
Karen.
as well.
How could we have left you out?
But Kelly and George have such a close bond, and George's new book is really, it's a book about how to be a better writer and how to be a better reader. And it really, the way that she described it to me is that this book is like taking George's graduate program in writing. And, you know, there's so much to learn. He brings in examples from great literary novels, and she said it's going to be one of the best books on writing you'll be able to listen to. So she's super excited about it, and we're always excited to be working with George. He has such great books, but then he has such great ideas on how to present things in our format, and this is a testament to our process and the idea that we collaborate with every single author on every book, as much as they want to collaborate in the audio format to make things great.
I love that. And I think too, as you can see, we really let them be a part of it and bring what they can and want to bring to it. He played music on his recordings, and as we'll see later, as we meet some more authors that we've worked with, we really embrace their opinions, and it's a collaboration in every sense. But this is such a cool one. And I love that idea. I remember listening to audiobooks in college, especially Shakespeare was something that I think got me through, being an English and theater major. And there's something about being able to listen. So I love that idea of a masterclass on writing from George himself is really a really special thing to have in this format.
I've always taken one of his writing classes, and now I get to take it for $24.95 or whatever it costs to get the
Well, speaking of classes, guys, we're in college today. We have a little quiz for you guys. Can you believe it? Wait, I was so excited about George. I didn't have my instrument ready. We have a pop quiz. This is just like college, right?
Drums and all.
When Karen saw the photo of John Cheska, she said, "Is that Vladimir Putin?" Did he Vladimir
Putin? No, it's not.
And
it is not. It is John Cheska. Stinky Cheese Man.
John would appreciate that tremendously, though.
It seemed appropriate. I hope that this pop quiz is not so hard that it has you banging your head against a microphone. I was trying to find all the microphones I have in my house. This is not an audiobook microphone, but it doesn't hurt when you bang your head on it. Okay, so my question for you, my audiobook friends, is, here's my official microphone. Do you have a favorite story about working in audiobooks?
Go ahead.
Dun, dun, dun.
Go for it.
Okay, let me think. I really do love this story. It has to do with my daughter Stella, who's going into third grade. But this story is from when she was in kindergarten, and I visited her classroom for some reason. And she was in the corner with headphones on, and she was like, "Give me a minute. I'm listening to an audiobook." And I was like, "Stella, that's what mommy does. I make audiobooks." And she was like, "No, you don't." She did not believe me. That I think she was just starting to understand. She was 5. Did she really understand what an audiobook is? But for her to listen to it and then hear what I, do for a living, she's, that's just, it was very, very funny. And her teachers were kind of like, okay. And then since then, I read to her every night. I read to both my daughters every night. And sometimes, they're not happy with my accents, or, they say it's not authentic. So I will give them the audio edition. A recent one was Because of Winn-Dixie by Katie Camillo. Stella was not happy with my Southern accent, so I downloaded the audiobook for her, and she listened to it in one day, and she said, yes, she was much better. I said, well, yes, Cherry Jones is a much better actress than Mom.
Oh my goodness.
So I'm glad you enjoyed that.
I don't know. You could just work on it. Maybe Cherry can do a master class with you.
Now I'm reading Harry Potter to her. I think we're on the 6th book. So
no pressure.
I try to do all the English accents, and Hagrid is, I'm not consistent with him, and she'll always stop me, and then she'll bring up a clip from the movie so I can see how the actors do it, and then I'll try to do those voices, and so she's,
I'd like to record that and sell it, please. Can you please?
Harry Potter from, New York.
Oh my God.
New Yorkies, yes.
And Dan, you're not off the hook. You have a pop quiz to answer as well. What about you?
So I guess one of my favorite audiobook stories over the years has been, I was recording in Bermuda, of all places, with Michael Douglas, who lives there.
Oh.
And I had to take this really long bus ride from where I was staying to the studio every day and back. And one of the days I was going back to my hotel, I got on the bus, and this woman pulled out of her bag the giant volume of CDs of Bill Clinton's My Life, the third volume, because in libraries it was released in 3 volumes.
Wow.
And
Wow.
she just had just put away the last disc and then put it back in her bag. And I couldn't help but lean over and I said, "Oh, did you like that?" She was like, "It was long, but I loved it." And we literally, for the next 45 minutes, just talked. I said, "Well, I produced that book." And she was like, "Really?" And then she's like, "I listened to the abridged version. Now I'm listening to the unabridged." And we talked for 45 minutes about the experience of recording those books, but also, just audiobooks in general. So it was like having a book club on a bus ride for 45 minutes. And,
Wow.
I feel like I convinced her after that was over to be a lifelong audio listener. And that was a really great experience. And it really just, more than anything, it made me realize, the magnitude of what we do, because a lot of what we do is we record an audiobook, we put it out in the world, and you don't hear much ever again unless, someone has an issue with it. So, it's really nice to sometimes hear feedback from people who are out there buying books or listening to books in libraries and then telling you that the work you did was good. It makes, this process can be completely overwhelming and frustrating sometimes, and just trying to put all the pieces together. But it really makes it feel like it's worth it. I'm sure, Karen, you agree with that. With all the work you put in on certain projects, and then it's kind of quiet, and then you're like, "Man, I hope I did a good job." If one person comes up to you that, "I listened to that book and it was great," it makes you feel so good.
It really does. I have a neighbor who is losing her sight, actually, and her daughter lives with her, so I've been sending her some audiobooks, and she just will let me know that she so appreciates it, and she just loves it. I sent her a giver of stars. I sent her Beautiful Ruins from, another publisher, but I worked on that years ago and I loved it. And, it's just very gratifying that, it really does remind you why we do what we do. Dan's so right. We get to kind of stuck in the details and actually making things happen. And then to hear that they're being valued and appreciated is it's just so worth it.
Well, and that's a good segue into, our pop quiz. We're going to stay in school for another second. But audiobooks are not cheating. And we all know this, but I think this phrase resonates so strongly. We've noticed it so much at library shows, or just in general. I think when people see this message, it sort of affirms for them what we all know, that it's not cheating. But it's such a good reminder of why. And so we just wanted to remind everyone about a few points of why we say this and why we push this message so much, because it's so important.
Yes, so here are some quick fun facts about why audiobooks are not cheating. So did you know that 85% of what we learn by listening, which I totally agree. 30% of people are auditory learners. So sometimes people, I feel like, personally, I love to listen when I'm multitasking too. So it gets me to focus on the other task at hand, but I'm still being able to digest everything going on. And this also exposes listeners to new vocabulary, which I love too, because let's say you read a word, don't know how to pronounce it, they're doing it for you. You can just skip Google, let the audiobook do it for you. Amazing. They provide an understanding of correct pronunciation of English, dialects, and non-English words. So I know a lot of non-English speakers learn to speak English sometimes by watching TV, listening to the radio. Audiobooks are another great addition to that. This also demonstrates fluent reading and appropriate phrasing, intonation, and articulation, supports struggling and gifted readers, and then they promote a sense of intimacy and human connection, which we love because it feels like you're talking to someone, similar to podcasts where you're in conversation with these 3 people you don't know, but you feel like you know them after the 10th chapter you listen to or the 10th podcast episode you listen to.
So true. And I think, it's funny, Dan, you talked about being on a bus before, because one of my favorite examples, which after this episode, we will send around a recap, and there's a link to some amazing science articles that have been written about exactly this point. But I don't know if you guys remember, there's that example that a cognitive scientist once gave about, if you were driving somewhere, let's say we all had to get to work today, and someone drove there in their car and someone else took a bus. you would never say to the person who took the bus, well, you cheated. You know, we all ended up in the same destination. And that always, to me, was such an amazing example of why this is true, that it's about getting to the place where you have the story in your, you know, in you, and you've experienced it and you understand it. And we all arrive at the same place no matter how we get there. And I think so many of the titles you've already talked about today just give so many examples of all of these points of why it's important. And I think too, during this time, which we're going to get into a little bit too, is, you know, that sense of intimacy and human connection that I think so many of us are lacking, which is why we're loving the opportunity to gather in forums like this can also be found in audiobooks. And I think there's something so special about inviting that voice into your home or wherever you are. So speaking of that, there are a lot of questions. I mean, you've talked a little bit about process, and I know you've probably talked about this a lot, but sort of, can you take us through a little bit from beginning to end? Like, I think, you know, it's so much more than picking up a book and getting behind a microphone. Can you kind of quickly lead us through how an audiobook comes to be?
Sure, we'll do the quick version because obviously, you know, we could, as Jen and I know, we can do an hour on this.
I know, this is an hour-long show.
But, you know, just a quick overview, and Karen, jump in. You know, when we start out, we receive our title list from our editorial team, and it's usually everything we're publishing at Penguin Random House and some books that we've acquired from outside. We have 15 producers who we distribute. We get in a room and we all select titles. So, you know, it's really important to us to have producers working on books they're really excited about and interested in. We just feel like, you know, it really encourages them to kind of put everything into each book that we work on. But producers get the books, they read the manuscripts, and then we reach out to the author and try to get a sense of what the author is hearing in their head when they're writing. And as we know, that can be a little disturbing. And when you're dealing with like Stephen King, he's like, I'm hearing many different voices in my head. But like, you know, there's that conversation starts to drive how we get to the casting process. Karen, you want to talk about casting?
Yeah, I mean, this is my favorite part of the job, and probably, you know, the most important, because we want to work with narrators who really align and are able to bring into the audio realm the author's intent in terms of tone and characterizations. So when I read a book, I will initially think of a few narrators, because I've been doing this a long time, working with a lot of the same narrators for years. And I'll kind of use that as the framework. And then I'll try to think beyond that too. Okay, so here's who I think could do a good job. And let me think about some people kind of similar who I haven't worked with before. And I go on Ahab and I see who's out there, because yes, we want to keep using the same narrators because they're reliable and listeners love them, but we also want to expand the number of narrators that we're working with and bring new actors to the format. We're really into developing, and that's why we have Ahab. And then I'll go to the author and I'll make some recommendations, and they'll either come back and say, yeah, I love this person first and this person and this person, or they'll come back and say, I'd really like to hear more samples, and this is more along the lines of what I was thinking of. And I love that process too. It kind of goes off in a different direction, but it really gets to the heart of what the author's looking for in their audiobook, and we want to answer that. So we may hold auditions so they can hear a bit of somebody reading from their actual book, because for an author, I would imagine it's hard for them to listen to a voice or a performance that's not their actual book. So we hold auditions, which we now do through the Ahab platform as well, and that's been an amazing tool for us. And then, we decide on the casting approach, and we move on to assigning the team that's going to work on the audiobook. So we assign a director who will work with the actor on prep, and they'll make sure all their questions are answered in advance of the recording, and that they're on the same page, and there's a game plan going into the recording. And then we kind of connect them to the authors to make sure we get all pronunciations. So there's a whole prep aspect to preparing for the recording. And then we kind of let go a little bit, and we let these people who we've worked with for many years and some new to us, just kind of get into the booth and record and get to piece together in post-production. And that's how audiobooks are made.
And one thing we still do that I think a lot of publishers don't, and we always talk about this, is our quality control process. So when the book is completely recorded and edited and all those tummy noises and bad takes are taken out of it, we have a third party who's never read or listened to the book, listen to the book with a final copy of the book, and just send back a last list of notes if there are anything that they have questions about, or if a character somehow was inconsistent on page 1 to page 70, can we change that? And we may bring the actor back just to do some retakes. So that quality control process is super important to making sure that when you put it out, you don't have to worry about mistakes in programs.
Yeah. And speaking of some really special programs that demonstrate both, I think, our use of narrators we've known a long time, and then welcoming some new voices. These are some productions that I know you're especially excited about. Some that are out already, some that are coming soon. But do you want to share why you chose these to add here?
Yeah, I mean, When Stars Are Scattered is a tour de force. It was the first book, the first maybe 2 weeks into quarantine that I started listening to. Every morning at 6 a.m., I would walk my dog for an hour and a half and come back and just eat up an hour and a half of it. And I didn't want to go to work after that. I wanted to keep listening.
Well, that's part of your work. So that's
this is a full cast production, and the challenge, it's about Somalian refugees trying to find their way out of a refugee camp. And it's heartbreaking and funny, and it is so authentic because Kelly and Julie had to go out and find Somalian actors to record this book, and there's not an overwhelming amount of Somalian actors, especially that we've worked with in audiobooks. So these actors recorded in different locations around the States. It has full music and sound effects throughout. I think it's one of the best recordings I've heard in the last few years. But the thing that really helped me, it's a recording that really helped me through the first couple of weeks of quarantine, because you're sitting there saying, oh, wow, I have to stay home and stay isolated from people. And, you realize there are big problems in the world. And it kind of put quarantine in perspective for me for the first few weeks that I was listening. And it was just, it's an unbelievable escape. And at the end, there's an interview with the author, Omar Mohammed. So it's a really complete audio recording, definitely worth listening to.
And that's another great reminder. I think, not that, again, I feel like we're preaching to the choir here, but to be able to, recommend, especially to young listeners, how to find more empathy in their hearts, especially during this time, because it is so hard for kids. But I think this is a great example of how, so many different ages can kind of come to terms with where we are and where other people are in their lives. And also there have been so many questions about graphic novels making their way to audio. And I think that's a really special thing that has been happening more and more. And then I know, Karen, you're so excited about How Beautiful We Were, which was moved to March, but also has an incredible full cast.
Yeah, I just love Mbolo Mbue. She's the author of Behold the Dreamers. So it's just a beautiful book that Prentice Oniyeme narrated. We produced How Beautiful We Were in March and April, right at the beginning of the lockdown. Mbolo really wanted Prentice to read on it and serve as the anchor. I mean, the story is really remarkable. It takes place in kind of an unknown African village that is being taken over by an American oil company. And the narrators are villagers, different first-person points of view. So Prentice, I had to track him down. I knew that he hadn't really been narrating a lot of audiobooks. And when I got him on the phone, he said he was in school to become an acupuncturist. And I said, well, Prentice, can you please, narrate? And, they had such a nice bond, Mbolo and he. On Behold the Dreamers, we had lunch together to talk about all the characters when that book was going to record. So he recorded a part of How Beautiful We Were, and we filled out the cast with some amazing actors who had home studios, and the director worked with every single one on consistency and pronunciations. And I do think it is such a wonderful production that did get moved out, and I'm just excited to see how it's received next year.
Although it is exciting too, often we don't have audio casting news so far ahead to tell our librarians. So now you know when you're getting ready for those high holds what an important recommendation this really is. And I should add, Prentice is the gentleman right on the bottom underneath the author's name. But there's an amazing full cast, and you can find all of these narrators on the VOT site. And then I'll keep us moving. I know we've jam-packed so much into this hour, and it's been so fascinating to hear all you have to say, but this is another really amazing production, or not just one production. This has now become a whole series of productions, Dan.
Yeah, I think we're up to like 18 of these books. And
wow.
I'm going to throw this in because, these Brad Meltzer graphic novel type books are just the perfect thing for, I've handed these to my 8-year-old, and she just ate them up one after another, and then went back and listened to each of the recordings. And what I love about these books is it really does show that you can take something that's highly visual and adapt it into a format that, 15 years ago, when I used to walk into my publisher's office and say, we've got to be doing graphic novels, we need more graphic novels on audio. And everybody just said, well, that sounds very expensive. And, it's a lot of, and back then it really was.
Yeah.
And it was just unusual. And now the fact that we're able to take these wonderful books and have authentic accents for things like I Am Anne Frank, or, with really great actors. I mean, I think these are really good examples of what you can do in the format when something is highly visual. And I just think these are not getting enough love out there and in the audio format. But Brad.
Oh, well, then we're talking to the right crowd. Tell your young listeners. I mean, I also think there's so much more interest in podcasts from young people now that this is almost like a mini historical, what a fun way to learn about history through listening.
Oh, yeah. And you look at the cast photo below of the first group that we did, and we recorded these all, at least the first 14 in one room with all of these actors. And I sat them and kind of, it was like filming, it was like almost like a theater production in the studio, but this is like a virtual who's who of audiobook narrators with January and Lavoie and Mark Thompson, who reads Star Wars, and Oliver Wyman, who's read tons of books. I mean, this is a great, great cast. And the mixes and the sound effects and music really kind of tie it all together. So definitely worth listening to.
And then moving on and talking about graphic novels and all that, we're brought to this fascinating slide.
Yeah. So these look like some amazing productions. I actually listened to Angels in America, which since these are all defined as an audio original. So could you tell us more about how you guys define audio originals and how these can possibly be changing or evolving over time?
Sure. I mean, I think audio originals in general can mean a couple of things. One, it can mean something that's originally written for the audio format. So not something that is a book first, but will be an audiobook first. And I think in Dr. Afra's, in the case of Dr. Afra, that's actually the case. We had that script written with a Star Wars writer. We worked very closely to make it, kind of really audio centric. And then the other kind of original is just something that was built for a different platform, like Angels in America is a theater production. And how do we adapt that to our format to make it accessible to audiobook listeners? And people have been doing a lot of audio, I would call them theater productions, but I think they've just been kind of plopping mics on stage and saying, oh yeah, this is an audiobook of a theater production. When, as Jen, you've been an actor, there's a lot of visual cues
I don't know what you're talking about.
There's a lot of visual cues that you miss, in audio if you don't figure out ways to adapt theater production for audiobooks. And Karen and I worked on that audiobook for over a year.
Wow.
I think we
I know you guys could do a whole hour about just production, but
we have done an hour on it, yeah.
But I would say that I think, and Karen, you would probably agree, I mean, over 20 years, it's one of the top 5 things I've been a part of in terms of producing books. And Karen, you can talk a little bit more about Angels.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's still, it's fairly recent, but I think it will remain, one of my top two things that I've worked on. Really unusual in that, it did take a year, from the time we started talking about it to the time it went on sale, touching it every single day, working on it every single day. We recorded everybody on their own. They had all of these performances just inside of them, and then we just worked very closely with our sound designer and editor on piecing it all together. Dan and I listened to several versions of the entire thing. I think the runtime is close to 7 hours. We had comments ranging from, tighten up this space or use another take to make it sound a little bit more natural. And then we really worked on creating some soundscapes to enhance the performances and to just to create a very unique list. I was happy when it won the audio for drama. I mean, I feel like it was such a highlight that it was recognized, and it was because a lot of work went into it. And
I'll send it around.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, I was saying we have a really cool 5 things you need to know about this production that I'll make sure we send in the recap, that because we talked to some of the sound engineers that you connected me with to answer some questions. I mean, it's really amazing what went into this.
Yeah. And then
many late nights.
Yeah. At the time when we were doing it, we were really excited that we could bring this production to people who didn't have a chance to come to New York to see the Broadway production. And now that I think about it a little bit more, with Broadway being shut down, I mean, this is just another opportunity for people to, who can't get to Broadway at all, to just have access to this amazing performance by all these incredible actors.
And also, just again, another testament to working closely with someone Tony Kushner, who didn't have any audiobooks out ever, and was very as you can imagine, very protective over what is one of the most important plays in history, coming over to this format. So we spent a lot of time talking to Tony about our approach, and then adding things. The last piece to it was saying, look, we need to keep some stage direction in this. How are we going to cast that? And how are we going to, and so we stripped out a lot of the stage direction and just kind of kept the essential stuff, and then had Bobby Cannavale and A.D. Falco as part of the cast. So it's a beautiful recording. You'll laugh, you'll cry. It was a year's worth of work. So
it's an amazing experience.
Year-long production sounds like. There it is.
Yeah. It's one of the few audiobooks I've listened to on the speakers, in my apartment when I've been alone. Usually I listen, and I had that thought. I mean, I'm in an apartment building of my neighbors are going to be like, what is happening in there? Because you almost feel like you're on stage with them because it surrounds you, and it's so immersive in a way that I've never experienced theater in that way on audio before. It's really special. And then I know we're getting close to our hour. We have so much more to share. So getting started with sourdough is a very cool new thing. I joked last week I'm the only person who I think has not made sourdough in this quarantine. But
no, I haven't either.
What I've been waiting for.
I mean, just real quick, this was just in response to basically everybody doing sourdough during quarantine.
Yeah.
The authors are the owners of Tartine in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
And I believe they came to us with this idea to do an original audio production of, how to make sourdough bread. So we went for it, and there you have it.
You don't have to get your book full of flour when you.
And my waistline thanks them.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to also make sure you got a chance. I mean, you've shared a little bit about what you've been listening to now, but what's personally getting you through this moment with audio? Karen, you chose this one.
Oh, I know. I just love this production, and it's going on sale September 1st, so I'm excited for everyone to experience it as well. We recorded the new Elena Ferrante, The Lying Life of Adults, with Marissa Tomei. I mean, I love it because actually pulling off this recording during quarantine with Marissa Tomei is a small, not small, huge achievement. A lot of things to factor in, and scheduling, and where she's going to do it. And I just think the end result is such a beautiful performance. She really poured her heart into it. The material truly resonated with her. You can see from the quote, she and the director were just very emotional in the studio, and it comes through in the performance. So I'm listening to it now, and she's never read an audiobook before. So that's why, her partnership with the director was so important. And I do feel like her, just this being her first one, but having that connection to the material really did. It's just a very unique and special production. So I hope everyone enjoys it.
I'm sure they will. And really quickly, I know there are a lot of questions, and we'll try to do our best to follow up with some of those answers. But someone asked if trained theater actors are harder to direct in an audio environment than film. And I would think not, because the stamina is there. Their dedication to knowing how to power through a long day is there, which is very different from film, actually. So I would think it's easier. Do you guys agree with that?
Yeah, the opposite. I mean, film actors, I think, for the most part, are used to getting on set, saying a few paragraphs, and then going back to their trailer. This is a marathon. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And theater actors, you're right, have the stamina for this. And traditionally, this industry is built on theater actors. It really is.
And then also, Dan, this was your pick, and it's so funny because you chose this title for what you're listening to now, and then BuzzFeed News just this week came out with that article about how audiobooks are saving this writer's life right now, and this was also on her list. Do you want to talk about why you love this one right now?
Yeah, I mean, Dominic's a friend of mine, but James McBride is just an unbelievable writer, and this book really, I started listening to it during quarantine. Again, another book I could not put down. It takes place in a 60s Brooklyn neighborhood where the local drunk shoots a drug dealer, and all of a sudden his actions kind of ricochet all around him, and all types of people are affected by it. It's really funny. There's Irish gangsters and detectives and all different types of characters, and Dominic does such a good job of just kind of going from character to character. And it had to be a real challenge in studio, because when you've got an Irish gangster yelling at an old New York police detective, just going between those two accents is challenging enough. But, more than anything, this book really kind of it has real people in it. And that's what I love about James's writing. He really knows how to bring real people on and put them on the page and not make them one-dimensional. So each of these characters is unique, and Dominic really does inhabit each of them.
That's amazing. And then I know people are saying their lists are growing. We're almost at an hour, but we've talked a lot about process. You just talked about accents with Dominic. I had to show, I always love this photo that Kirby Hayborn, who's won 2 Odyssey Awards, sent me of how he prepares for audiobooks, and he writes out, timestamps and different characters and different voices. And it's just really incredible to see, I think, kind of the behind the scenes look at what's involved, because I think we take for granted that people step into a studio and just read a book, and that's not at all what it is. So speaking of that, we wanted to just end on kind of coming back to our special relationship with the authors and casting, and let you talk a little bit about some really special, unique, collaborative experiences that you've had lately on that front.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of working with Kimberly Brubaker Bradley on her past 2 books, The War That Saved My Life, narrated by Jane Entwistle. Such a beautiful, wonderful, wonderful story. And Jane was just the perfect narrator for it. This title actually won the Odyssey Award a couple of years ago. So
that's all of you at the ceremony there.
Yeah, that's right. This was fairly straightforward because every single accent was in Jane's wheelhouse, and she just nailed it. Fighting Words is Kim's new book that's actually
now available. It just came out.
Oh, it just came out. Okay, that's right. And it's set in Appalachia, and the narrator is a young African-American girl who has some experience with sexual abuse. I worked closely with Kim to connect her to Bonnie, who's just an amazing force.
Another Odyssey Award-winning actress.
Another Odyssey Award
2 times.
But she definitely did a lot of research and preparation for the kind of accent that Kim had been hearing in her head. Kim actually referred us to a reality TV show called Appalachian Outlaws for the accent. And then, so Bonnie did prepare extensively for those accents. And it was really nice to see this Earphones Award. I hadn't seen that before, so that's great. And, Kim, I just love Kim because she handles all of these very delicate topics so beautifully and with great sensitivity. And in the end, these young protagonists just feel the support and love of the people around them, and they really triumph. And the narrators just kind of just hammer that home. And these are great, great audiobooks to work on. Very lucky.
And this reminds me, I can't wait till we can all get together. It's such a special thing to have, as we did, to have you, the producer, with the author and the narrator all together at something like the Odyssey Awards that really celebrates so much of what we've talked about, but in person. So I really look forward to the next time that can happen. And then finally, we're almost done, guys. Thanks for sticking around. There's so much interesting, stuff to talk about. We'll have to have you back sometime. But these are some other interesting casting stories here for some new audiobooks. Well, one that's coming soon. But Dan, you worked with Jim Carrey on this fascinating audio.
Yeah, I mean, Jim, as people would never think of Jim as a writer, but Jim is unbelievably smart. And this book really kind of takes literary fiction and memoir and twists it all together into a format that I think people are going to be writing memoirs in this way in the future, where it's like maybe it wasn't real, maybe it is real, you'll have to figure it out. But which is a lot of what, when you're reading this book, you're trying to figure out, did this actually happen to Jim, or is this completely ridiculous and he's just making it up? But what's really great about the book is, generally on every page, you have to put it down and say, wow, there's subtext to this. There's more to this. This is way deeper than what Jim is presenting you. He's just going a lot deeper than many memoirists do in this space. And Jeff Daniels, who I've worked with, I actually won an Odyssey honor with Jeff Daniels reading before. Actually, sorry, that wasn't Jeff. But I've worked with Jeff before.
He read Call of the Wild, right?
Call of the Wild, yeah. It deserved an Odyssey honor.
That's what you meant.
Jeff, you would think that Jim would want to come in and read his own book, but it's written in the third person, so it's kind of interesting that you would write this kind of format, memoir-like format, and then have it written in the third person. So Jeff does such an amazing job and very balanced narration. For what at times this is just completely wild story. So I think it's a really fun ride. So I think it's definitely worth listening to.
And I love too. I mean, the fact that it's like his Dumb and Dumber co-star. I mean, it brings such nostalgia back for me as a kid, and watching them together and knowing that they have a personal relationship that obviously extended beyond that time is really adds to that memoir or misinformation vibe of like, having him.
We recorded this during quarantine, up in like Michigan. Jeff has a studio. His son runs a studio up in Michigan. So it was really just one of the first big celebrity things we did during quarantine. So I think it's great, fun book.
That's amazing. And then Jodi Picoult, I know she's spoken before at audio events, including the Audio Tea at BEA, and she always has a lot of thoughts, right, Karen, on her casting.
Yeah, Orly Moskowitz is her longtime producer, and Jodi's just an example of a very informed author. She's a huge theater fan, so she suggested Patty Murin to read The Book of Two Ways, and Patty originated the role of Princess Anna in Frozen on Broadway. And this recording also happened at Patty's home with her home studio while she was, 8.5 months pregnant. So we really got it in under the wire. She actually had her baby a little early, so and everybody's fine. But this is one that really was a true collaboration between producer, author, and actor to make it happen.
I love Jodi's announcement where she's just like, she's a force. I mean, she's such a fan. And I know, Audra McDonald read Jodi Picoult's Small Great Things book. I'm such a, obviously, theater fan, as is, I know, Sydney. We were both like, oh my gosh, it's Patty Murin. And also my son is going through a huge Frozen phase right now, which I'm actually really excited about. But I showed him clips from the Broadway production on YouTube. And
let it go, Jen. Let it go.
Don't tempt me. I have lots of mics here. Anyway, and then finally, I just wanted to wrap it up with some audio resources. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. I wanted to mention Volumes. I've mentioned this before. It's our amazing Penguin Random House audio app. If you're not already subscribed for Volumes, if you're a librarian or an educator, we want to make sure you have access to some listens on the app that can help you with your own listener and readers advisory. We know that sometimes there's a long wait, even for you, to hear the productions that you're most excited about, and your list just got so much longer thanks to Dan and Karen. So we'll send around a link in the wrap-up of how you can request access as a librarian to Volumes. We also have our podcast, This is the Author, which really originated as the brainchild of you guys, our producers, and it continues. So we have that podcast that you can find wherever you find your podcasts. And then, of course, we've mentioned the Odyssey Awards. There's the listen list. There's so much work that goes in on the librarian side. And we thank you for all the listening you do all year long to help us, promote these amazing productions. And I think these lists are incredibly helpful. So if you're not already familiar with some of these awards and lists, and also Library Reads, which we're always excited about every month, they happen to make great listens, believe it or not. And then also the Books on Tape website. We hope you come visit us if you haven't already, booksontape.com. You can listen to clips of all of our amazing audiobooks. If there's a clip missing, check back because we will have it up soon. We have clips available for everything. So that's also another great resource for your listeners' advisory. So we're going to leave you with a question. We hope you'll use our hashtag, and also it'll be in the survey at the end. But we want to know, after all of that, after what's coming and everything that you're excited about, we just want to ask you as librarians, what favorite audiobook you recommend to first-time audiobook listeners at your library. So we can't wait to hear your answers. Dan and Karen and Sydney, I'm sure you have your own opinions about this. So you can tell us too, and we can share those next week. Oh, and I have some special guests walking in the door just as we sign up. So I'm going to wrap it up. They're back, and we're leaving. You're back. You're on the air. So thank you so much, Dan and Karen. That was incredible. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Thank you.
We're back next week. The first Wednesday of every month at 11 a.m. is our fall schedule. So that means that is next week. Can you believe it's September next week? We'll be back with our 17th episode. This was such a special Sweet 16 with you, Dan and Karen. Thank you so much. This was so much fun. And everyone has lots of questions. We're going to go back and read them, and we'll hopefully be able to get some answers to you in a wrap-up or in the future. So thanks so much for tuning in. This was such fun. I could talk to you all day.
Keep listening. Keep listening.
Keep listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you.
Bye-bye.